So the storyline that pops into mind when you think of the band Fun is one based in nostalgia. The band that got so famous off one single that it ended up in a Chevy car commercial that played at the Super Bowl that tried to play on your inner wild side, kind of like this energy. And not too long after, they dropped off the face of the earth. Fun became nothing short of a whisper, a ghost if you will, of early 2010s pop. What happened? Well, more or less typical breakup stuff. A lead singer who wanted to try a solo career and a band that felt pigeonholed by such viral success. But we're not here to discuss that. In fact, we're not even here to discuss the record that Fun put out before Some Nights titled Aim and Ignite, which is one of my favorite records and I feel remains massively underrated. We're here to discuss what came even before that, a band you might find hits you in all the right places if you're a Gen X or late Gen Zer. They're called The Format and they're fronted by the same exact guy who fronted Fun, Nate Ruess, working with his fellow singer-songwriter multi-instrumentalist friend Sam Means. Formed in 2002, The Format aimed to bring a flavor of indie pop to a scene that desperately needed it. In the early 2000s, being in a band was still cool and MTV was still around to encourage rockers to follow their dreams in hopes of getting a placement. The Format was one of many bands in this scene that showed a lot of promise. Their first single, aptly titled The First Single, dropped in 2002 off their debut 5-track EP and gained popularity through good old word of mouth and local Phoenix radio. The dancey drums and acoustic guitar riff hook you right away until you're smacked in the face with Nate's opening line. If you've never heard The Format before, it might feel a little weird to hear Nate's voice in this more vulnerable, less processed, less theatrical way, but as a unique feature for a 2000s indie band, it stood out just as much then as it did when Fun came around. Further into the song, you hear this nihilistic approach to a breakup where Nate says, "Listen, I know it's gonna end here, I don't really know what to do anymore, I kinda hate myself, let's just get rowdy and cause a scene," which is like very 2010s pop already. Calling for action to like stomp or clap or get rowdy, those are all sentiments you'd find in Fun's catalog, but you're just seeing it in a more straightforward manner here. That single did so well that they got signed to Elektra Records that same year and dropped their first studio record titled Interventions and Lullabies the following year. Through touring, word of mouth, and early music internet buzz, The Format caught the perfect storm and sold 100,000 copies of their debut record. I think the best way to describe the charm of Interventions and Lullabies is probably really clever comfort indie with a dash of Arizona emo. Sure, the recordings don't sound great, the clarity and definition lost to an era where nothing sounded good because it was the early days of digital recording, but it's not the kind of music that needed it. And sure, Nate's voice isn't as developed and confident as it is when Fun comes around, but it was still super unique in timbre. Now, trouble for The Format started when it came time to produce a second record, as it usually does for a band when they have success off their debut. Their sophomore record, Dog Problems, was a lot more quirky and less straightforward than their first one. We're talking more complex song structures, we're talking added instrumentation that expanded into the orchestra. It's weird because it still has that original charm and simplicity in the writing, but it felt like maybe this is where Sam and Nate wanted to go all along. Especially having a successful debut and a newfound label backing, they wanted to up the ambition. Take the title track for instance, it starts with just Nate and a piano, then somehow evolves into a march-like drum pattern with woodwinds and horns. Further in, you get a chaotic bashing of every instrument on the track, as Nate asks,
"Was it worth it when you slept with him? Did you get it?"
After which he decides to spell out half of the word because as he vents his frustrations with his partner. And the weird thing is, as disjointed as this all sounds on paper, Dog Problems is still a catchy song. It may not be for everyone, but it retains that musical theater-esque quality that you'll find on Fun's first record, just in a way messier, more indie way. The story goes that the record label, now Atlantic Records because Elektra had closed up shop for good, was not happy with Dog Problems as a project. Which I understand, because if I had signed them off of Interventions and Lullabies, I'd be like, what the f is this? So Sam and Nate decide to release Dog Problems on their own through their own label called the Vanity label. Unfortunately, the record leaked 2 months before its release, which is kind of weird for an indie record like that. So the boys just decided to put it out immediately on Networks Music Store, which is a small indie label that still exists today. Priced at just $8, the record sold 2,000 copies prior to its actual planned release. When the actual release finally came around, MTV aired an episode of The Format playing a surprise performance at a Sweet 16 party on their show My Super Sweet Sweet 16. I found this super odd at first, but I guess in hindsight it makes sense. Being in a band was still cool, the internet was still in early stages, and this was basically like reaction content for the time. The format ultimately got more attention from Dog Problems, with a music video for one of the tracks, The Compromise, actually ending up on music television. Critics and fans were all over it, and Sam and Nate used the momentum to make 2006 theirs. By the end of the year, they were touring with the All-American Rejects. 2007 didn't disappoint either, with the band garnering enough attention to play a show in Japan, get on Carson Daly twice, and start touring with a little band called Steel Train. Steel Train was fronted by the one, the only, Jack Antonoff, who ends up being in Fun later on. Mid-2007 marked the 1-year anniversary of Dog Problems, which at that point had sold 36,000 copies. However, when 2008 began, that momentum slowed to a halt, and in February, fans woke up to this message. We have just put out word that we will not be making a new format album. Please understand this was a tough decision, and we're both upset about it. Sam went on to complete solo work, and Nate, well, he went on to form Fun with Jack. Now, the story doesn't end here. Early Fun material proved to be great, and a lot of the reasons for that can be traced back to what was done in the format, specifically with Dog Problems. But once the Fun was at an all-time high with that Chevy commercial, I think that's where Nate started getting ideas about a solo career. And so when Fun ended, Nate went on to make a solo record, and I love the guy's voice, but that record's not good. Andrew went on to do some solo stuff for personal enjoyment along with some music for movies, and Jack went on to be basically an indie super producer. And that left Nate all alone, more or less for the last 5 to 7 years. Until he wanted to get the format back together for a reunion tour in 2020. And I swear, when I saw that, I hit the roof. I was like, how and why? Doesn't matter, I'm in. And it occurred to me at this point that a reunion tour would probably be just out of pure fun for Sam and Nate. This music represents their come up when they were just doing it for fun, and when they had enough success for it to be just a little bit sweeter. Nothing overwhelming, no award shows, no huge corporate label to deal with, just admiration from the Arizona indie scene and beyond. Unfortunately, the P word pushed the reunion tour back multiple times until it was just canceled. Am I still in my bag about it? Yes. But hey, if you now find yourself listening to and enjoying these songs, drop a like and a comment, and who knows, maybe you'll help revive the reunion tour. Thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, check out this one I did on Jack Antonoff and why people aren't a huge fan of him these days.